Venezuela right now is safer than places like Mexico, Colombia, or Brazil. If you are a
What?
tourist, really, I can say that without a hiccup. Here's the issue: making ends meet in Venezuela is expensive. So Venezuela is expensive for the poor. However, when you reach a certain threshold, actually is cheap for the rich. Venezuelans, there are over 700,000 Venezuelans in the United States. Just a few hundreds are the felons. And those are the ones that the Fox News puts every single day. I like the US people actually. They don't get as much credit because I think they are usually most Americans that I have met, beyond my clients, I'm talking the everyday people, are very cool, are very polite. That thing that they say abroad that the US people are racist, something like that, I think is completely false.
In Peru and then Colombia, every single local from those countries told me all their problems and the crime are Venezuelans. Are Venezuelan girls the most beautiful in all of Latin America?
They are on the cohort. I mean, I have to be very honest. I have to
On
be,
the cover.
since I started, zero kidnap clients at the moment. Venezuela had the highest inflation in the world until last year. Right now, it's going to drop below the top five. By the end of the year, we are poised to close low double-digit figure. The average Venezuelan is easily more adaptable to American society that other people from Latin America, let alone people from, let's say, the Middle East or Africa or a place like that. Because Venezuelans, we grow up with Hollywood and that kind of thing. This is allegedly, so I have to be,
Allegedly, yeah.
so I have to be fair with. There are groups that are known as colectivos. Many governments have included on the blacklist of travel for their nationals. North Korea, Syria, Afghanistan. They always Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela is nothing like those countries at all. 2014, of course, we had a collapse, an 80% GDP collapse that only happened in countries with war, something like that. For instance, Ukraine, it fell like 40%, something like that, since the war. Imagine that. So, and many people haven't recovered. And that's why you heard the horror stories that most of them, until a certain degree, are true. So I have to be fair.
Buenos note. Actually, it's 8 o'clock in Munich. Oh, you got me doing a late night podcast, my friend, the Venezuelan insider Andreas. I really wanted to do this because I'm fascinated with the country of Venezuela. One, because of the perception it has when you grow up in the USA. Two, it would be an amazing Latin American destination because I see all these photos. The weather seems always good. Obviously, the beautiful Venezuelan ladies. But three, I met many Venezuelans outside of the country, and I've heard absolute horror stories. But after following your page and seeing more and more about what's actually happening in the country, it re-sparked my curiosity. And I know there's always two sides to the story. I know perceptions are many from different sources, and I don't think you work for the Venezuelan government. I think you
No,
seem
I
like
do.
a legit dude, and I'm very excited for you to kind of blow the perceptions of people who think of Venezuela as what they see in the news. So, how are you doing, my friend?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Now you were born and raised in Venezuela, like we discussed,
Right.
but you've gotten some worldly travel experiences. So just kind of tell me why are you back home? Is it the family, or do you believe that the country is headed in that good of a direction, and you want to help rebuild it?
Well, that's kind of, like a Reader's Digest of my train of thought. I've been in several countries. I live in a couple of them. One of them, of course, your home, USA. Also, I live in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So, and I've been in a bunch of other countries in Latin America and Western Europe. So I kind of have the picture, the macro picture of what how the world works, pretty much. And something that I truly like my country. I really love my country. Of course, there's a lot of bad things happening that happen in my country, and that's one of the that's one of the things because there are a bunch of bad things, a bunch of good things, and right now trending online is just the bad things, and that's what I try to communicate via my content and my platform is showing the good, the bad, the ugly. I mean, trying to do it, of course, within the limitations that I have. But Venezuela overall is a very, very cool country. And also for the future, I'm very bullish in the future for my home country.
Awesome. Hey, I really respect your belief in your home country and you try to make it a better place. But today I need to get down to the answers about the future for foreigners, for investing, for tourism in Venezuela. So let's start one with is it better now than it was 10 years ago? Are you seeing a lot more tourists, a lot more foreigners investing?
Foreigners investing, yes, definitely. Now it's more of the time of doing the due diligence on the country because now let's say 10 years was 2014, of course. We had a collapse, an 80% GDP collapse. That's only happened in countries with war, something like that. For instance, Ukraine, it fell like 40%, something like that, since the war. Imagine that. So now there are a bunch of things. I mean, because it's a lot of things. It was the perfect storm. First, the oil economy is very leveraged with. Sorry, the Venezuelan economy is leveraged with the oil economy, and back then, 2013, that's when the 80% collapse happened. Started to happen until 2018. Well, back then the oil prices were very, very high. Were over $100 per barrel, and of course that has direct implications in an oil economy like Venezuela, and of course the other OPEC nations. And of course, now on that 80% GDP collapse, the top was the top back then. The Venezuelan economy was, let's say, quote unquote, overpriced, like like a stock. And of course, I mean, the GDP back then was close to 400 billion US dollars, and right now at some point collapsed until a little bit over 43 billion. And right now we're on the neighborhood of over 100 billion. And of course, that happened. Of course, a lot of self-inflicted wounds by the Venezuelan government, I have to say, and also a lot of corruption and mismanagement on the state-owned oil company PDVSA. And of course, but it was, and also a bunch of political things back then. It was the transition between Hugo Chavez, the late president, and Maduro that happened on 2013. And so a bunch of things going on. And then when we got Trump, we got the sanctions, and also that affects the economy as well.
Okay. I did a podcast with a girl in Brazil about 6 months ago, and 6 or 7 years she smuggled herself across the border, and she ended up in the northeast of Brazil. And she told me horror stories. She told me stories of dudes in Caracas on the streets trying to eat bones of animals that were like, weighing 50 pounds. These people, the homeless people. She told me a lot of smuggling stories of women, massive corruption. She told me that the government blamed an electric outage on like a iguana that the
Yeah,
Americans
yeah,
sent
yeah,
or some shit like
like a reptile, something like that.
yeah.
Yeah. We have it's a running gag here in the country. Every time that we have a blackout here let's say on the house, they say, "Oh, they want to strike again," something like that. I mean, we have a joke about it.
Okay, but so you're not seeing that kind of chaos anymore, correct?
It's better now. We had, the bottom of the crisis was on 2017. That was awful. That was, dystopian. I even back then I just dropped the ship. Back then I said, this thing is gonna end up being a failed state. I want to get out. I mean, by myself, I said it. I lost my business. I lost. I mean, basically most of my network back then. I mean, it was awful. I mean, I still have, some PTSD afterwards. That was like our Vietnam for Venezuelans, and and many people haven't recovered. And that's why you heard the horror stories that most of them, until a certain degree, are true. So I have to be fair, but most Venezuelans haven't recovered yet, because you have to add the other thing is that uh, let me, for instance, the migration. We have a bunch of migrants all over the world. and that's no secret. And Germany, they are mostly on Leipzig, I believe. They have like a center over there, but we have a
So
bunch of.
many in Peru and Colombia, and a lot of people bash them because they say they're causing the crime, they're doing this, etc. But there's so many Venezuelans all over the world now.
Yes, and for instance, Peru. Now, on 2017, the worst of the crisis, we had scarcity, hyperinflation, and afterwards we had some anti-government protests that end up badly. A few hundred people pass away, thousands injured, a bunch of political prisoners, of course. So a lot of bad things happen going back and forth. It was the worst year because it was the worst year for everybody, not only for the whole country, but also for even for the government. The government started getting sanctions, getting the stamp of being, a dictatorship, things like that, get isolated, and also because that sold the narrative. This government is a dictatorship and very incompetent, and it's not completely the case, but the narrative suits them. I mean, they have to own it because it's their fault, and they like to blame the government, the U.S. government, or the Fourth Republic. It was the political period before the Chavismo, and they like to blame those people as well. I mean, that every former president of Venezuela is dead right now at this moment, so you cannot
Wait,
blame
why didn't
anyone.
why did the sanctions come down on Chavez? Why did they wait till Maduro? There were already sanctions, but the hard ones came with Maduro, right?
No, no, every sanction. Now, the only sanction I believe, now doing a recall, it was a sanction against the Venezuelan aircraft industry. I mean, we don't have an aircraft industry, but mostly, the airplanes that we have, they're in the air system here in the country. During the Bush presidency, it's the only sanction that I can think previous to all of this collapse. Now, but you also have to remember that this collapse became, went to the media and created a lot of buzz. Is between 2014, we had some anti-government protests on 2014, and then we had the wars on 2017 and after 2017. Now, the issue is that those things happen. The situation right now is way better than compared on 2017. It's not like it's excellent. It's far from being great, but it's way better than 2017. Now, the issue is that many people abroad has the picture of Venezuela on 2017, and that's the issue. That's the first thing that. And sometimes, big media, CNN, BBC, that kind of thing, Deutsche Welle, they kind of paint the picture that Venezuela is still like that. No, well, with Deutsche Welle, I have to be fair that they send some people here and to record, this country is cool, what happened. I mean, it's not what they have on their mind. But Venezuela is not like this war zone like Ukraine or Afghanistan or Syria that many governments have included on the blacklist of travel for their nationals. You know, North Korea, Syria, Afghanistan, they always Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela is nothing like those countries at all.
So there was a lot of kidnapping of foreigners at one point, right? That is gone.
I mean, there were kidnaps, but against foreigners, I mean, that can happen to anybody. When
Okay.
it did happen, actually, one of the things that the crime rate has reduced a lot, not only on nominal terms, because you have to add that, okay, several million people left the country, but still, on per capita basis, the criminal activity has been reduced significantly. And I would say Venezuela right now is safer. Talking on practice, is safer than places like Mexico, Colombia, or Brazil. If you are a
What?
tourist, really, I can say that without a hiccup. Meanwhile, and this is here's why. Here's why. It's because these countries, Mexico, especially the tourist hotspots like Cancun and Rio and those places. What happens is that there is an industry, a crime industry against those particular kinds of individuals. Americans, Europeans, that kind of thing. In Venezuela, it isn't. No, it's not common, it's not as common. And actually, every time people are very friendly. And something I noticed, the Venezuelans treat very well the international, especially the Western international. And I know that in Colombia and Brazil, I love Brazil, by the way, I love Brazilian people. Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico is like that. I also love Mexico, and I love Colombians as well. They are my neighbors, so cannot get angry with Colombians. Well, anyway, but with Venezuela, it's something different. I don't know. I don't know why. I kind of have an idea that many people that travel all over the world, they love Venezuela, and Venezuela becomes their favorite country, or Venezuelans become their favorite people. And I don't know. I don't know what happens. I mean, what happens a lot, and happens basically on a weekly basis. Since many years ago, I'm talking since many years ago. Now, the narrative of Venezuela is all of the bad things that happened recently, and but afterwards, after they learn a couple of things about the country, they actually love it, and they like to live, travel, and spend lots of time here in the country. Even some of them like to live here in the country full time.
Saying Venezuela is safer than Brazil and Colombia is an interesting take. To me, Brazil is super safe. I've spent about a year and a half of my life from the south to the north. Only had one incident of getting robbed, and it was just for a necklace, and I was being stupid. Colombia, I enjoy very much, and I think the people are actually. I've had better experiences with the locals in Colombia in 3 months than I did in a year and a half in Brazil, and that's saying a lot because I love Brazilian people. But Colombia, I did feel a little more on edge in the Calis, the Bogota. Santa Marta was pretty chill, and then I was in Cartagena, so I did feel a little on edge in Colombia, but nothing happened. I didn't get scopomined. I didn't get robbed or anything. But to say Venezuela is safer than Brazil and Colombia is shocking to me. So
That's our perception.
that's your perception. Are the stats? What do the stats say?
That
Or are
no, no,
the
but that's a bold perception. Like
oh, a
your
bold perception?
yeah.
Smart guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, actually, if you want data regarding that, okay, the macro data, there is an NGO here in the country. It's called OVV, Observatorio Venezolano de Violencia, OVV. So they have the data, they have the statistics, and you can check it for yourself. Now,
It's legit. It's the government statistics. How do we
no,
know to believe?
it's an NGO. It's an NGO.
Oh, NGO.
It's
Oh,
a
okay.
private NGO. So, and actually, the government doesn't like them that much. And something that is not talked about a lot regarding the safety in Venezuela. Funny thing though, Venezuela, when it was richer, the crime rate was way higher. And right now, since the crisis, the criminal activity has been reduced significantly. A lot of things regarding the migration, also the incentives of the criminal people, of course. And but the most important thing, between 2015 and 2019, the Venezuelan government actually did something like a Bukele-like, being harsh with crime. And well, many people would argue those are the criminals, but I mean that's another thing. But actually, they reduced the crime significantly, and combined, of course, with the diaspora that many of them left. Actually,
Okay, I don't like bringing up the past too much, but in the
no,
podcast
go
episode
ahead.
I did with the girl, she told me that Maduro released the prisoners out of jail if they promised to be like his henchmen, and he let them loose to cause havoc on populations. Was that true?
Uh, it was when that happened. I mean, I need the time frame in order to
I
give the.
assume 2017, 6, 7 years ago. So she came over. So
Okay,
during the chaotic time.
okay. What happens also? There are groups. This is allegedly, so I have to be
Allegedly, yeah.
so I have to be fair with. There are groups that are known as colectivos. They are kind of a pinch strike force, like like that. That people, that those groups, they attack union manifestations, things like that, against unions, something like
Okay.
that. So, and those colectivos actually did that during the protest. During the protest, I'm most likely your friend is talking about 2017. So 2017 is when it was awful. I mean, it was awful. Venezuela looked like a war zone. Of course, without an actual war. I mean, not like we have tanks, something like in the Donbass right now, or Palestine. But still, it was awful. I mean, it was awful. Actually, a funny thing, there is a movie right now. There is a movie. It's on Netflix, by the way. It's a movie called Simon or Simon. It's based on real events, but I mean the characters are fiction, and talks about it. And Venezuelans got remembered because it's tough for us. Remember those horrible days, and it was awful. And not only that, that many people, especially young people, fled the country. So stuff. I mean, we're still in a tough situation on the mindset. Now the funny thing is that the country is actually way better than those days. Still a long way to go, but still, the Venezuelan people hasn't forget the of course hasn't forget. It's very fresh still, and the people. I mean, of course, with all of this post traumatic stress, they still, for instance, the people that migrated during 2017, 2018, just after those events, they still have that's the last image that they have from the country, and also combined to the stress of migrating, that is a stress by itself. And I'm not talking about being an expat or being a digital nomad. I'm talking being a full economic migrant with nothing more than just a little savings and going across the border, that kind of thing. That's a completely different game. And of course, that's why many Venezuelans, when they talk, they react emotionally about the country. And I understand. Of course, I have to, I, I need to have empathy for them because it was hard for all of us, including myself. But in order to get the best from my country, I need to paint. I need to paint the clear picture about the country and the good and bad. And there are a bunch of good things, but these people forget it or just plays a second fiddle. And there is a lot of value here in the country that the average Venezuelan doesn't see because it's everyday life for them. Meanwhile, for an international, especially a Western international, there is a lot of value, and it's very intangible. But if you can put it on tangible terms, that that's when you could create synergy and create something special for the country.
I watched that video of what was it, Binsky, when he went to Venezuela, Drew Binsky,
Yeah,
and he went to the really rich mall, and all the Western goods were there, but they were 100x the price because obviously getting them in the country is very difficult to do. But what is like the cost of living? Is it similar to Brazil, where if you want to live like a Brazilian, you could do it on $600 a month, but if you want to live like a good Western lifestyle, it's expensive in Brazil. If you want the electronics, if you want, all the comfort that you usually get back home in the United States or Europe, you got to spend money. Is that kind of like in Venezuela, or what? Give me the cost of living figures going on right now in the country.
no, well, Brazil will be kind of similar. Remember that I've been quite a few times in Brazil, and the issue with Brazil is that it's expensive. I mean, depends also regarding the exchange rate, the Brazilian real. And I've been a couple of times in Brazil where it's very, very, very expensive. Now, regarding Venezuela, that's kind of similar. The cost of living in Venezuela is expensive. Here's the issue: making ends meet in Venezuela is expensive. So Venezuela is expensive for the poor. However, when you reach certain threshold, actually is cheap for the rich. That's kind of it's kind of
Explain that further. Explain that further. So what's this
okay.
threshold? And then so the higher echelons of life, that stuff is cheap, but daily food is expensive, obviously, compared to the money made. Like, because a lot of people don't understand this. A lot of people, think, oh, Brazil is dirt poor. And I mean, if you want to live Brazilian, if you want to eat acai, to drink the coconut, drink cachaça, eat rice, beans, chicken, yeah, you can live for stupid cheap and have still a good time on the beach, right? But if you want, an iPhone, if you want a MacBook, if you want just Western stuff, then you got to be rich, right? So kind of really dive into that threshold for people to understand, because some especially like Westerners think, oh, if I'm going to Brazil, I'll be a king off $1,000, but that's not necessarily the case.
No, well, similar with Venezuela. Now, for different reasons, that in Brazil is very different regarding the economy. I'm not an expert on Brazilian economics, but I understand there is a lot of tariffs and taxes and that kind of thing regarding Brazil. But I mean, still it's manageable. Also depends on the city. It's not the same. Brazil is huge. It's not the same thing Rio that living, close to the border or the south of Brazil. Oh, now let's go with Venezuela. Why is like that? Since of course the country mutated since 2017, and of course the supply chain. And I'm gonna get into the economics. I mean a little bit, so please bear with me. The issue is that what makes everything cheap, affordable, or expensive is the economics of scale and the supply chain. We learned this during COVID. And what happened is that basically the supply chain in Venezuela got destroyed, most of them, most of the every supply chain, and now has been restructured. Also, I have to say that the Venezuelan economy before the crisis had a lot of subsidies, on oil, on gas, on electricity, public services, that kind of thing. And of course, that everything adds up to the bottom line of each good and service. And since 2018, that's when things start turning the other way. The Venezuelan government lifted a bunch of restrictions regarding price controls, capital controls, and has been more private business friendly since 2018, especially with the local one. And but also had consistently, gradually eliminating some subsidies of the Venezuelan economy. So basically, you are creating a new supply chain right now. Since 2018, the supply chain is different, and you have less scale, and also you have to import a lot. And combined, of course, with the frictions that we have here in Venezuela, combined with also everything that happened during COVID, that's why we have all of the basic stuff, the basic consumer goods and services are more expensive in Venezuela compared to other countries, let's say like Bolivia, for instance, or Colombia. Colombia, that is, is very cheap actually on the grand scheme of things. Like Mexico used to be before, all of this digital nomad thing. And also, I have to mention this: since 2019, the Venezuelan economy has been de facto dollarized. So the standard is the USD. And also that increases up the prices. You don't have that lag between with the exchange rate that much. And actually, Venezuela, I remember during many decades, no, during a span of 7 years or something, Venezuela had the highest inflation in the world until last year. Right now, it's going to drop below the top five. And by the end of the year, we are poised to close on a low double-digit figure.
How does the people and I mean the government feel about a dollarized economy when the biggest enemy is the USA to the government? I don't assume all the Venezuelans hate America or Americans, but how does
Not at
that
all.
feel in the brain? Like why you're dollarized, but the USA is the number one enemy to the Venezuelan government.
Well, that happened actually very spontaneously. So since late 2018, people start just paying in dollars. And every time you go to a place, back then, you went to a place and pay in dollars, they happily take it. And until 2019, we had a big national blackout back then on 2019. And afterwards, people start completely paying in USD. Now, the Venezuelan Bolivar still used a lot, mostly on small transactions, and you have to pay taxes and everything with that. But the standard for the economy is actually the USD. Now, something that happened recently is the government is fighting back a little bit. A little bit. They created a tax, a 3% tax for pay. It's called the IGTF. And Venezuelans say, you know what? I don't care. Just I'm gonna pay just the 3%. And they do a couple of things. They still print money, but since I'm sorry. Now since 20, I remember since 2018, 2019, the government has been more fiscally responsible, and then we have. So I have to be responsible on that because when I say a bad thing, a good thing about the government, they people go crazy. But actually, they have been more frugal with the government expense, and that reduced a lot the money supply. And since 2019, we had a process of disinflation, and on nominal terms, on Venezuelan bolivars. The issue is that currency has three functions: is medium of exchange, unit of account, and reserve of wealth. And basically, the Venezuelan bolivar only has one, that is medium of exchange for small transactions. But for the larger things, like, of course, unit of account and store of wealth, store of value, and that's why the people with Bitcoin and gold go crazy that you have to use Bitcoin and gold. But the USD is actually the reference on that. So the Venezuelan bolivar lost the confidence of the people on two or on the three things, regardless of everything that the Venezuelan government does in order to preserve the value. However, recently, and actually I created a piece of content regarding talking about this issue, is that we are kind of seeing a small process of de-dollarization. 90% of transactions are until this year, it were on US dollars or Venezuelan bolivars. And the other 10% were the euro, Colombian peso, Bitcoin, and gold, actually. But most of them were on the USD and Venezuelan bolivar. Now, we have seen a reduction in the number of transactions with US dollars, and the Venezuelan bolivar is gaining ground regarding the number of transactions. Still, the volume is higher on USD.
Interesting. Okay, so go to that threshold. Making ends meet. How much US? Go to that threshold. Making ends meet. How much USD per month? And then living the high life. Kind of go through the different budgets in Venezuela right now. USD per month. And then living the high life. Kind of go through the different budgets in Venezuela right now.
Okay, depends. In order to make ends meet for a typical household, putting aside rent, would be something around $1,000 per month. That's the basket of goods and service, not only food, but the typical stuff that you need: transportation, education, some random staples, uh, a couple of things regarding entertainment, that kind of thing. That's basically the minimum that you need in order to have. I'm talking a decent lower
Four
middle
people,
class.
right?
I'm
Household,
gonna
four
say
people.
lower middle class. Let's say lower middle class.
Four
Okay,
people, correct?
yeah, for people.
Right.
That's what you need. Now, in order to have a decent middle class, standard of living is 2,000, 2,500, something like that per household. And after 5,000, actually, you have an excellent standard of living here in the country.
Okay, so 5,000 for a household of four, right? Okay, what about this high life for let's say the digital nomad type of person, the dude that wants to come in there, buy the house? I mean, if he's spending $5,000 in Venezuela, you told me like once you get to the upper echelons, the whole lifestyle is crazy what you can do. Is that correct? Right? So
Yes.
kind of get into that aspect here for dudes like me and for that kind of whole nomad community.
Okay, if you want a similar lifestyle compared to, let's say, Miami or Dubai, a thing like that, in Venezuela, costs cents on the dollar, and you can have it actually.
So what are you talking? $5,000 a month? Is that what you're saying?
Well, also depends. I mean, also depends individual expenses, and depends how baller you want to go. For instance, VIP. I'm talking, for a rich. Let's talk about the CPI of the rich. Let's say, well, for a young guy, that most of our audience are men. Let's say you wanna a VIP bottle service, something like that. That in Miami costs like $10,000 on Las Vegas or Dubai. Here it's gonna be way cheaper, something like that. Getting a yacht is cheaper actually. It's very cheap here in the. I mean, it's cheaper. I mean, for that particular world, and also real estate
You say you're getting a
has.
jet?
No, I'm talking a yacht, a boat, a
Oh, a boat.
speedboat.
A boat. So what are you talking about? What kind of prices for a boat?
Uh, Depends. Also depends because that's a word of its own. But you can get a nice one. I kind of like to look the prices. Let's say 25, 30,000. You can get a nice one, entry level one. I'm talking nice with a room and everything. I don't know the
Oh, Rome. Oh, wow.
yeah with a, I mean like a small yacht, a big speedboat, small yacht, something like that, like 28, 32 feet long. So
Okay.
something like that. Of course, the maintenance is expensive. You know how boats are and stuff like that. A high end place, a
Yeah. What
couple
about a
of thousand.
penthouse? What about a penthouse in the was it Margarita, the best island you always post about, or a really touristic kind of hotspot? What's a penthouse? With a good view costing around there? Rent a
Mm,
month.
Depends. I mean, depends. Now, Margarita is it's very different compared to the rest of the Venezuelan economy because I mean, it's a cool place actually. It's one of my favorite places in the world.
Hmm.
But the issue, the economy is different. It's not tight. It's mostly about discretionary consuming. And so when everything bad happens, we had a recession or something, Margarita is the first place it's gonna feel it because it's mostly on. I mean, it's just services. I mean, you don't have industrials, you don't have oil in Margarita, anything like that. So there's a lot of it's a big island. It's a huge island, by the way. It has 11 municipalities, and what happens is that since it's huge, it's a lot of real, free market capitalism over there. A lot of supply and a lot of demand, and it's seasonal. It's a lot of competition. So if I give you a price on Margarita Island, uh, it's going to be inaccurate compared to the rest of the country. Having said that, I will say that, of course, depends because it also is very particular. You have to do a lot of, scavenger hunt over there. With $100,000, you can get a little bit over that. You can get a very high-end property, and renting, I would say $1,000, $1,500, something like that. Of course, depends on every particular location, every particular place. Talking the
I
high
as-
end.
I assume with your account you are helping foreigners invest and come to Venezuela, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so through your interactions, through who you've worked with, your clients, kind of walk me through how that process has been for them. I mean, the government hasn't came in there and took their property. Are they still smiling at years later? Kind of give me a breakthrough and where they're from too. Kind of give me the whole spiel about who you've helped and the process that went through.
Okay, well, thanks to my marketing, usually are Westerns, the people that I help. Now, overall, we have a bunch of Chinese, Russian people from Iran that I don't cater towards particular clients, maybe Russians, but they are not my typical clients. My typical clients come from the US, Canada, the UK, Germany, Western Europe, and that's in Australia and New Zealand. Basically, mostly Anglo countries, English speaking countries, and also of course the people from Europe
Is
and
there a
some
reason for
people.
that?
No, the reason is that my marketing is mostly thanks to my marketing. Is that my marketing goes towards them rather than people from China or people from Iran. Usually, we have a bunch of Chinese people here, so usually they hire someone of their own here, a Venezuelan Chinese, and we have also a bunch of Middle Eastern, so they go to them, they go towards them, so they help each other. Meanwhile, I mean, Westerns don't have a network here, and that's why I help them. It's mostly my services are mostly due diligence about the country, depending on what they're doing. They are investing, they are traveling, Maybe they need a legal service, and I can refer them to a lawyer and a bunch of stuff. And on my website, you can see all of my services. And but mostly is that is due diligence about the country.
So walk me through some of these clients that you've helped out with, and they was smooth sailing. They have no issues year after. They're still fine. Kind of give me the reviews of their experiences. You said a lot of people end up loving the country, love the people. Is this most of your clients? They've had a great, beautiful time.
Yes, actually, most of them love the country. They come for a couple of weeks and stay 3 months, 6 months. Some of them already are thinking about maybe making it full time, getting the appropriate visa, or maybe getting a real estate property on the future. Yes, but they love it. And since I started, zero kidnap clients at the moment. So
That's a good stat to have on the website. How many Americans have you worked with?
a bunch, a lot, a lot. I mean, at this moment, maybe few hundred. I
Few
There are a
hundred.
lot, and they're doing fine. And US actually sends most of my clients, mostly people that already been in other places in Latin America. And but most of them are doing the due diligence. It's not like they're living here in the country. Some of them already traveled to the country, or maybe they are dating a Venezuelan abroad, or they are married with a fellow Venezuelan, and they are doing a life together, and they want due diligence on how to proceed on very personal projects that they have.
Okay, so let's say I come to you, I'm talking to you. What's the initial steps? What do you start getting in order for me to come visit the country? I mean, can I use a credit card? Probably not, right? Do I have to bring a
Yes,
bunch of
you can.
cash?
Yes, you can use international credit cards, and actually the ones from the US are better than other ones. What I will suggest is try to bring two or three. Maybe one bank works and the other doesn't. For instance, if you have a Bank of America card that swipes, it's like a hot knife on butter. It just cuts right through. And Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, those kind of. Now, if you have some of these regional banks, those are the ones that you're gonna have issues here in the country.
The visa process, you walk through that with
Yeah.
people. How does that work?
No, no, no. I mean, depends on the individual. Depends on their plans. They're investing. They are just traveling, spending a season, or they already have a relationship with a Venezuelan, and they want to do something about it. I mean, they are thinking about getting married, all that kind of things. That requires an entire different process. Also, Americans are the handful of countries that Venezuela requires a tourist visa. US, Canadians, and also Venezuela has reciprocity with many nations, especially other Latin American nations like Chileans and Peruvians. They require visa for Venezuelan nationals, and the Venezuelan government requires a tourist visa for them, and similar to Brazil actually.
What's that?
And
Oh, keep going.
no, no, please go ahead.
What's that process like for me? Does it take a long time? Is there a lot of
Yes,
paperwork?
the worst thing about Venezuela is the bureaucracy. Many people worry about getting kidnapped, something like that. But actually, the bureaucracy is by far the worst thing about Venezuela. It's unbearable. And in Latin America, it's bad, but in Venezuela, it's horrendous. And this is something that actually I push a lot. This is my biggest complaint at the moment with local authorities. And every time that I know someone that maybe do something about it, I say, please, I'm begging you. Many internationals they want to invest, they want to travel, but they have those issues. And actually, the top real estate agents, I work with a bunch of real estate people. The top agents actually don't want to work with. They don't like to work with internationals because there is an extra step regarding the bureaucracy, and they don't want to be involved in that.
Okay, so how long does this process take? If I was to start doing it today to get my visa, tourist visa to Venezuela, how long is it taking me? How much money is it costing? What kind of BS do I got to go
No,
through?
the money. No, no, the money is not that expensive. It's mostly depending on where do you have residency. Americans have to go to the embassy on Mexico City. and because there is not an embassy, a Venezuelan embassy in the
What
US
about
right
a
now.
European embassy? Can I go anywhere around here?
Oh no, you have to go to your local embassy, and for instance, it's awful. The European embassies are awful, awful, awful. I'm talking the Venezuelans. The Venezuelan embassies, maybe Madrid, but depends
Okay.
goes on every case. Depends if you have a second passport or a residency in another country that helps you a lot because you have different options. And
Okay.
so depends. I mean, depends. It can be depending on your location and your residency and when you're where you're
Okay.
applying.
The average American with just an American passport, how big of a problem is that to get a tourist visa to Venezuela?
Actually, it has gotten a little bit easier on the past, let's say the last year, since the last year. I've seen more Americans. You know, it's funny because many Venezuelans, especially, of course, the more humble ones, right now, this year, I'm getting information of a couple of people, you know, humble people that work on tourism, that kind of thing. They have met their first American this year. I'm getting that, especially on Margarita Island. It's a funny thing to share. And many Europeans are coming, they are loving it. Actually, we have direct flights, charter flights from Russia, from Poland, and of course, from Madrid, we have a bunch of flights. Also from Istanbul, we have direct flights. Actually, the flights, the availability of flights internationals has improved a lot significantly on the past 3 or 4 years, right after COVID also that affected as well, because basically we had like 3 flights a day internationally on 2018, something like that, and that has improved a lot significantly.
So, my friend, the average American with only a passport, or I think the Canadians have the same rule. What's the
No, the
process like for them?
Canadians is
Easier?
worse. No,
Word. Okay,
Canadians is
so
worse.
what's the process though? So they go to the embassy in Mexico
They
City,
have to
right?
go to embassy. They have to go to embassy, and depending on their profile, they have to submit the documentation. Also depends on the embassy. Let's say, for instance, in Mexico City, they they care towards you. I mean, you can physically see the people on the embassy. I mean, it's going like going to an office,
Yeah.
and they have to submit a documentation. Now the issue is that this bureaucracy on the paperwork says one thing, what they require. In practice, changes a lot depending on the consulate or the embassy. Also changes a lot how they do the process. So
See.
it's very, it has to be, it's very specific for each individual and also each location.
What's the average, my friend? What's the average? You've helped out a lot of Americans, so tell me, like the average for a person that just has the American passport, just the Canadian passport. Does it take 2 weeks, a month? Is there 50 different
Mm,
documents you need, or what?
Not like 10 different documents.
Okay.
You get a response, and also the rejection rate is high. And
What
if you don't know
percentage?
what you're, it could be like 80%. If someone goes alone for their on their own devices and starts winging it, it's like 80% that they're gonna get rejected.
So they
And
talk to you. You tell them the secret sauce, or what?
I mean, it's not like I have a secret sauce, but I have a better, because usually they commit, regarding the documentation, because this is something that, and I'm going to be respectful here, Americans are not good at it, bureaucracy, because of course, the United States is less bureaucratic than Latin America. Meanwhile, the Latinos, we know way better how to do. For instance, many people in the US
Just give a
complain.
bribe? Is that what we have to do? Just give a
No, no,
bribe,
no,
or
no,
what?
no, no. Don't even think about it. Many people think about the bribes, and because we're Latin American, that kind of thing. You have to be very careful because you can get in big trouble and also lose your money. So you have to be very careful of that if you are an international. And so beware with a bribe, because I mean you don't want to end up in a bad situation. So you have to be careful on that. That's the thing. Now the other thing is that many, they don't have the gravitas of dealing with this bureaucracy. Latinos, we have to. Many people, for instance, in the United States, they complain about migration, in all of these illegal aliens and illegal migrants and that kind of thing. The reason that what they are illegal is because the United States has a terrible migration policy. Regarding getting a tourist visa, this is just a tourist visa. In order to enter the United States as a tourist, you have to go through a bunch of hoops. It's an expensive process. It's a tiresome process and takes like a year. Of course, depends on your location. Ask anybody from Mexico or Colombia or that has a tourist visa, a U.S. tourist visa. So basically, high middle class and up are the only ones basically that they can afford. They can get to have the profile in order to get the visa. That's why very, very, very hard in order to just enter the United States. So we Latinos, we know how the process is because we are very afraid. Meanwhile, the Americans and the Europeans are not as keen on those process, and usually I mean they make a bunch of mistakes on the process.
Okay, if I hire you, this process is filled out really good, and I'm looking at what 3 months for it to get accepted. Maybe, and my rate is half and half, or what?
Something on that range. It also depends. I mean, doesn't it's not up to me. You're gonna improve your odds because I mean, just basic stuff are gonna be taken care of. I mean, it's not like I work for that. I mean, give a coaching. I mean, I don't work with the Venezuelan government. It's
So,
mostly a coaching process, and but it improves a lot because they put on the envelope everything and do the process. I mean, and also depends on the profile of the individual. Also depends on if they have a residency, things like that. If they
mm-hmm.
don't, they have to go to Mexico City, and I have to tell them, it's gonna be, have patience, and you have to grind it out. I mean, dealing with the Venezuelan authorities is, the bureaucracy is difficult.
Gotcha. Okay, so where do you send tourists their first time in Venezuela? What cities do you send them to? Do
I
you
mean, depend.
suggest?
No, I mean, depends on the particular criteria. We have like a handful of places. If you want something plug and play, probably will be Margarita Island. And afterwards, many people love Caracas. It's more Caracas is, let's say, twice as expensive as the rest of the larger Venezuelan cities, and could be way more than that. And also depends on many people, they only go to Caracas and the nice areas in Caracas depending on their particular requirement, or there are people that completely avoid Caracas. So Caracas is like you love it or you hate it, and they have been in a bunch of other cities but they avoid
Can
Caracas.
you compare it to another city you've been to? Maybe a Latin America city, or is it a whole different beast?
Oh well, mira, could be something similar to Bogota. Actually, that would be a fair assessment. And many people will say Bogota will be more beautiful and Caracas will be more beautiful. Now the issue with Caracas is that it's like a bunch of small cities put together, and it's not as uniform. So Caracas has a bunch of beautiful places and has a bunch of dreadful places. I have to be fair with that. But it's a beautiful. I mean, it's a very picturesque place. I mean, you're not gonna get bored on Caracas.
Where
And
else?
what else? Margarita Island already mentioned.
See.
I'm not living right now in Lecheria, but for the moment, but Lecheria is the time that I spend the most my time. It's a beautiful city. It's small. It's like Venice. You have a bunch of canals and school for navigation, and most of the city was built using artificial islands, like in Dubai. And it's a beautiful place and also very safe. You have the crime rate. If you're concerned about crime in Venezuela and you want to visit the country, go to Lecheria. You have a murder case one every 4 or 5 years, something like that. So it's very safe. So it's a small city, by the way, and also it's a little bit expensive. So if you're looking for a bargain, Lecheria is not going to be for you. Also, you have Merida. Many people like Merida. Merida's on the mountains, and actually it's very affordable. Probably the most affordable big city here in the country, but has also a lot of issues regarding logistics and infrastructure. But it's beautiful. Merida is beautiful. San Cristobal, similar to Merida, close to Colombia, by the way, close to the Colombian border. You have Tucacas, Moroccoy, the Falcon State is special, has some good things, but depends also on how you play it out. The logistics are very important. Puerto Cabello is kind of nice. Valencia, many people like Maracaibo because the people from Maracaibo are very nationalistic, regionalistic, like the people from Texas, something like that. And they sell their city a lot. But I'm not a big fan of Maracaibo actually, but I understand why they do it. I mean, also, but also depends on the requirement of the individual. I will tell them what is the best suited place for them here in the country. And also, I have to mention a couple of niche places that are very remote. There are Los Roques and Canaima. Canaima, in Canaima is a beautiful national park, very remote, and you have the largest waterfall in the world. The Angel Falls, Salto Angel. A beautiful place, beautiful place. If you love ecotourism and nature, you're gonna love that place. And Los Roques will be the Venezuelan version of the Maldives. Is also beautiful beaches and there are a bunch of other places that I'm forgetting right now.
I'm going to go kind of off topic with multiple different questions. The first one is your English is very good. What is the percentage of Venezuelans that speak as fluent as you?
I will say the percentage of people that speak some English is like 2 or 3% here in the country.
Wow.
Like
So
mine, I don't know, honestly.
is that your time in the United States? Did you study there, or why is your English like this?
Well, the issue is that since I was a kid, I used to watch cartoons in English,
Yeah, so,
things like that. And then when I was the first time that I live that I spent sometime I've been a bunch of times in the US, but the first time that I spent like a month, I remember I was 16 and I talked to people and I like to practice. That's it.
are Venezuelan girls the most beautiful in all of Latin America?
They are on the cohort. I mean, I have to be very honest. I have to
On the
be,
cover.
I'm paint the picture.
See?
Uh, there is like 4 or 5 countries that I believe have beautiful women in Latin America. There are Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, maybe, and Venezuela, and that's pretty much it. And of course, you can find beautiful women on the rest of Latin America, but those are, I mean, the big four of Venezuelan beauty. The average is not as great. I'm talking, I like to do the macroeconomic analysis. And I would say it's not like the average Venezuelan female is the most beautiful, but I will say that top 10% of Venezuelan females can beat the top 10% of every other country: Ukraine, Russia, Poland, Brazilians, Argentinians. The top 10% can beat every. I mean, and that's not a question. Actually, that's why they have the beauty pageants. Venezuela always kills that when on beauty pageants, Miss Universe, and that kind of thing. And the times that they don't win is because they rob the competition. Because I mean, it's not like Venezuela can win every single year.
Okay. In Peru, I was there November, December, and then Colombia, January to March. Every single local from those countries told me all their problems and the crime are Venezuelans. I want to hear what you think about that, and I want to hear, was the Venezuelans? I mean, a lot of them are economic migrants, right, from the lower classes, I assume. Kind of, what are your thoughts on how your neighbors are viewing you or your
Well,
people?
also depends. Also depends. Also depends. Now, I'm gonna be honest. Venezuela is not sending the best people to Peru. I'm gonna be honest with that. There are a handful of people from over a million that are problematic on that over a million Venezuelans that migrate to Peru. However, I'm gonna take my gloves off with my Peruvian friends because the issue about Peruvians is that Peruvian. I mean, I met a few Peruvian people that I like, everything like that. But usually, the Peruvian society is very racist, xenophobic, and also a significant cohort of them are unpleasant. And also, what's the funny thing is that they actually kind of envy the average Venezuelan because Venezuela is not sending their best. Now, there are most of the Venezuelans that went to Peru. They are not going to Peru, by the way. So if you're a Peruvian watching this, you can be stand still and be, be calm because Venezuela is not sending. The Venezuelans already learned the lesson. The issue was that on 2017, during the crisis, Peru looked like, like Switzerland, something like that. And many people, and the legal process in order to enter Peru was fairly easy. So you can become a legal resident fairly easy until 2018, something like that. Most of the people were, humble people, lower middle class, and migrated to Peru. But they were, very cool people that just want to work, they want better standards for living. Basically, they're offering their human capital. But of course, people that are not fancy travelers, not people with big savings or something like that. But back then, you can have a better standard of living being a migrant in Peru than living in Venezuela. Now, the issue is that, of course, a handful of people, like always, a handful of people commit crimes, and the right-wing propaganda from each country starts making, some exaggerating the situation and that kind of thing. And also because I have I have not recorded, but I have heard a bunch of stories of Peruvians committing crimes against my fellow Venezuelans, but you don't see that on the news. You only see when a Venezuelan robber robs the purse of a grandma or something like that, and those cases are happening from 1 million people. It's like maybe a few hundred, a couple of thousand, something like that. And actually, this is statistically proven that usually this is all over the world, not with Venezuelans. The average migrant and asylum seeker and refugee commits way less crime, like 3 or 4 times less crimes than the average citizen of each nation. That is statistically proven, by the way.
Okay.
And now the issue is that, of course, the migrant overall, this is beyond Peru. The migrant is an easy target for society, for politicians. Usually, in each country, there is one political party that attacks migrants because they're easy target. They don't vote, they don't have the legal rights or anything like that. They are treated like crap. Like, for instance, in the US, the Republicans take that role. But that happens all over the world. I mean, and the Democrats kind of defend them in order to just being against the Republicans. They kind of defend them, something like that. And that's actually something happening in the US. Well, that's another thing. And Peru is not different. Usually the right wing politicians attack the migrants because they are easy targets, and that's kind of it. Peru is a Latin American country.
Colombia said the same thing though too. Colombia said Venezuelan gangs are taking over. So what do you think of that?
Okay, in Venezuela it's different. Actually, the funny thing though is that this is the funny thing about Colombia, because in Colombia we don't have. I'm talking the vibe from the average Venezuelan. We don't have as much xenophobia from Colombians against Venezuelans. And yes, and of course, there are a handful of crimes. Yet again, they only get the bad news. But with Colombia happens something different. You know that Venezuela has like 5 million Colombian and Colombian descendants, something like that. Because it used to
What was
be.
it? Grand Colombia, right?
No. This is not like Gran Colombia was over 100 years ago. This
Okay.
is just recently. I'm talking people that I know, the people that I know
Okay.
that are Colombian or Colombian descendants. And they come in droves. I mean, like 5 million from the 30 plus million Venezuelan people worldwide. 5 million are Colombian and Colombian descendants.
Is
So
this
we have,
after Escobar and all that stuff? They went into Venezuela.
yeah, something like that, of course. But here's the
Okay.
deal. Here's the deal. So many people actually, we can argue in Venezuela, the xenophobic people from Venezuela, because we're already, now Venezuelans are less xenophobic and racist compared to most people over the world. But still, we still have it. Those are everywhere. Uh, During the 70s and the 80s, many Venezuelans complain about the crimes and every bad thing that happened was thanks to Colombians and also thanks to Peruvians, because we already have a bunch of Peruvians back then, but nothing like Colombians. I mean, we're our neighbors, and they used to come a lot to the country, and of course, back then and still now, I try to say, I mean, it's not like Colombians, but Colombians have a bad reputation here in Venezuela on that regard. Still, for instance, I love Colombians, I love Colombian culture, I love Colombia overall. But some people actually are xenophobic. The all racist people, that running joke that you have in the US, that all racist uncle that watches Fox News and lives on a trailer park and hates Mexico. I mean, we have it here in Venezuela, but they hate Colombians actually. They used to hate Colombians. I mean, back on the day, it's a funny thing. But actually, the many of the crime, most of the crime on this area, I'm talking just beyond the corruption and Chavismo, is thanks to drug dealing, and the drug dealing comes from Colombia. I mean, I have to be fair. I mean, with my fellow Colombians, I mean, it is what it is, and it's something drug related in this part of the world. The issues and that kind of thing, and most of the crime and the gangs and the cartels and that kind of thing that comes from Colombia. So I cannot tell. Of course, there are born and raised Venezuelans that have committed crimes in Colombia. Of course, that happens, but and also, I mean, something that I have to explain about the migration, because I mean, let's just reverse engineer this whole thing. What happens is I'm gonna give you a play-by-play of the migration. Maybe that can give you a vibe on how it works. The Venezuelan migration before 2012, 2010, 2012, 2010, 2012. Venezuela is not a migrants country, unlike Colombia or Mexico or a place like that. We only have like less of a million people living abroad, and usually for very particular circumstances. Let's say a Venezuelan model that married an Italian businessman or something like that, or maybe a well-educated young Venezuelan that get a master's degree on the US or Europe, anything like that. Of course, you have some economic migrants that used to be back then used to be middle class people that said, the United States, they went to the US a couple of times as a tourist. US is very cool. I'm gonna go, and they go illegally and they overstay their visa and that kind of thing. But that basically, and the same thing with Western Europe. Now we have a bunch of European descendants, European passport holders here in the country, several hundred thousand. Okay, those were the profiles of the migrant. So usually middle class, a little bit high middle class, maybe some lower middle class people. That was the profile, less than a million or a million, something like that. Then the narrative on, let's say, 2010, 2013, is that many young people said, I'm not going to have a good future professionally on the country, so I'm going to start migrating. And maybe that number jumped from 1 million to 2 million. On 2014, that I mentioned that we had an anti-government protest, that spiked a lot the migration. And people back then is when they started considering places like Panama. Panama was very big regarding migration on 2014, and Ecuador and Chile. And between 2015 and 2017, that the migration started to gain some ground. And also used to be middle class people, high middle class people. But then that was lower middle class people when they started migrating between 2015 and 2017. And 2017 and 2018, when we had the big issue, the dreadful crisis, that big, the big moment, I forgot the word for that. But I mean, that big moment that we had, the mayhem, that's where everyone started to migrate, and the lower middle class people that have never traveled outside of the country, less sophisticated. I'm not saying there are bad people, by the way. Most of them are actually good working people. The people that you see, for instance, in Mexico, in Colombia, the women that sells the tortillas, or they sell the coffee, or the house cleaning lady, or the guy that is a security guy, or the cab driver, something like that. I mean, talking everyday people, people that are not bad. That probably you run over on all of these places in Latin America. And of course, with them, a handful of bad rotten apples went with them, and that's why we have a mayhem. And also, everything is exacerbated by right-wing propaganda and right-wing politicians, and that's why we have all of this mess.
Good breakdown. Good breakdown. If you can't answer this, it's all good. But I heard uh, one of the biggest drug dealers in the world right now is the Venezuelan government, and they take the government planes to ship drugs throughout the world. Can you speak on that or no?
Well, that's above my
That's a
pay grade.
rumor. It's a
No,
rumor.
and
Yeah.
it's allegedly no, and the other thing is I'm not an expert on security, intelligence, that kind of thing. So I'm not only I may say something wrong. That's what I cannot answer the question. Maybe you have people that work on those particular things, and maybe they can give you a better answer. I'm not the guy for that.
100%. What you're well traveled. I'd like to hear your perception of the USA and Americans overall. Do you think we're fat, uneducated? Like what's the stereotypes? But you've traveled, you've been there. Kind of give me your outsider perspective on the country and the people.
Well, I like the US people actually, and they don't get as much credit because I think they are usually most American that I have met, beyond my clients, I'm talking the everyday people, are very cool, are very polite. That thing that they say abroad that the US people are racist, something like that, I think is completely false. And no, the only issue is that when you go to, I'm talking to the average people, uh, I'm not gonna say uneducated, but they lack culture from the rest of the world. This is the only bad thing that I can say from Americans, because I mean, here's the deal. Here's the deal about they. This is, I mean, it's just that because Americans, I mean, with all of the bad things that America has, it's a cool, probably the greatest country in the world in history. I mean, I'm not afraid to say that. I mean, not my cup of tea for living full time, but it's probably the best country in the world. I'm talking the most successful country in history, and I don't have any issue saying that. However, the average American have their average life, and they have a bunch of privilege, and also a couple of bad things that the rest of the world doesn't have. And they are sometimes very, I'm not going to say ignorance because I don't want to use the word ignorance. Will be something like,
We live in a bubble. We live in a bubble.
yes, it's a bubble. Yes, that's sometimes, and they should pinch that ball every now and then. That will be my only critique to Americans, and because the rest of the world works very differently. And sometimes, for instance, I have this issue because I'm in finance and that kind of thing, and I find people, especially the younger ones, that in America they suffer a lot. Especially, I'm talking the people on finance and entrepreneurship, that kind of thing. This is one of the few things that, and it's some Americans, not all of them, that they suffer a lot. This is a fallacy that is known as survivorship bias. That, I mean, you can Google it. I mean, I didn't come up with a name, but it's basically that you concentrate only on the survivors or the successful people when you have a particular situation. That particular term came during World War II. That you have the war on the Pacific, and you have the airplanes, the American with the air carriers against the Japanese ones, and a mathematician, a Jewish mathematician from Hungary came, a refugee during the World War II, and after he was recruited and do their thing, he was sent with the Marine guys, the Air Force guys, in order to help, logistics and that kind of thing. And something that the admiral and the generals were saying, that 90% of their combat planes were being turned down and just taken down by the Japanese ones. Only 10% were surviving that particular thing. And the issue was that the generals, admirals, I don't remember, they were saying the 10% that they are surviving, they are doing it because the engines are not going like that. And the mathematician, the Jewish mathematician, said, no, it's all of the way around. No, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me correct this. The admirals and generals view the, the fuselage of the plane. I don't remember the word in the body of the plane. Okay, they had a bunch of bullets and strikes and that kind of thing. And the general said, we have to reinforce the body of the plane because it's getting hit. And the Jewish mathematician said, no, it's all the way around. These planes survive because they took those shots instead of taking the shots on the engines. The ones that did not survive, they do it. They were not able to survive. In order, it's because they were hit on the engines. So the main point of the story and the term is that you have to concentrate when you see a handful of successful people and a bunch of unsuccessful people. You have to see what is going on, that the rest of the people that are not surviving, that's the key, not the people that survive. And that's a mistake that many Americans commit.
How are they committing that?
I mean, I'm talking everyday life, for instance, especially when they give advice, especially the wealthy ones, the successful ones. Because regarding for instance, I'm going to use an example on finance. You ask someone is savvy on finance in the United States, they're going to tell you dollar cost average, the S&P, the 401k, do their thing. I mean, that's typically, I don't know if you've been with an American financial advisor or something like that. They're going to tell you basic stuff that actually works. The issue is that in the rest of the world, that doesn't work. And I have to tell people, I mean, and many people want to invest on the S&P. That's for rich people in the rest of the world. In the United States, middle class people can have a decent job and dollar cost average. Okay, I'm going very needy with finance, but the main point is you're going to have a bunch of opportunities. Also, the credit in the US is very cheap, even with this high interest rates right now. The currency and also the synergy that you have in the United States. That's actually why the US and also the US being the US dollar have been the reserve currency of the world. So you have a bunch of survivorship bias. So what I will invite my American guys, my American friends, is that try to understand that in order to actually get more opportunities, learn more about the world, like you have done, Nick, and many people like you, on this Latin nomad sphere, you have learned that a lot, seeing it on the street. But it opens up a bunch of opportunities, a bunch of synergy, that how America and the United States works compared to the rest of the world.
Okay, I see it. I see it. Okay, what is your opinion on the border crisis in the USA?
Well,
And
it's
tell me,
tough.
hey, tell me, amigo, my friend, how much time do you have left? You got another 15 minutes? Is that
So,
fine?
yeah, yeah,
Don't
I
worry.
have. Don't worry.
Okay. What
Okay,
is your
I'm good.
opinion as a Venezuelan? Because a lot of they're sending their worst. They're the worst people ever. And what are your thoughts?
Okay, the Venezuelan side of the American side.
Both overall.
Okay, I've done research recently about that particular issue because Trump is getting on my nerve. By the way, I don't have a dog on that fight in the US regarding politics. I'm neither a Democrat or a Republican. But Trump has said a couple of outrageous things about Venezuela and Venezuelans, and I have to, do the fact check on that particular regard since nobody else is doing it, and especially that propaganda you're seeing on Fox News. The first thing that I have to clear out. If you're worried about it, anyone who listens this, watching this, Venezuelans, there are over 700,000 Venezuelans in the United States, and just a few hundreds are the felons, and those are the ones that the Fox News puts every single day, and that's why you have this particular perception about Venezuelan people. Most Venezuelan people just want to work, and actually the average Venezuelan is easily more adaptable to American society that other people from Latin America, let alone people from, let's say, the Middle East or Africa or a place like that. So because Venezuelans, we grow up with Hollywood and that kind of thing, and I mean, we accustom very easily. We are not going to have those issues that, for instance, usually Middle Eastern descendants have on Europe. We don't have that, so we get by very quickly on the US. And that's the first thing. Now, you have to, when I see things like that, I have to see the people in charge, because you cannot have authority without responsibility. On this particular case, okay, many people are going to blame Biden, and I understand why, but it's more than that. This is a bipartisan mistake, historical mistake, that since my investigation, I mean, it has been very, quick. A very quick investigation started with Clinton. On the mid 90s, he had a particular policy where basically he shut down the border, similar to, well, it's not something, the closest thing is the DMC in Korea. And what happened back then is back then, Mexico was sending a bunch of people to the United States. But most people,
Reagan was the dude that made them all citizens. All the illegals in California was the guy that, okay, and then I think that put the seed in a lot of people's head, like we can get a citizenship because he made a
okay,
lot of illegals citizens. But anyways, Clinton.
something I want to clear out, Monique, before, when you talk about illegal or legal migrants, okay, what makes you illegal? That's the first question that you have to ask yourself, because in the Bible, let's say
Me?
no, I'm talking
I
you.
have a work visa in Deutschland, so
No, no,
I'm
no, no.
legal.
I'm
You know what I
talking.
mean?
No. I'm talking. What makes you legal or illegal
This is a
overall? I
great point,
mean,
though. I know this is a great point. Let me. So the whole expat, immigrant, nomad
okay,
discussion thing. I think if you come to a country and you give more than you take, 100%, no, you stay there, do whatever you want. I think that should be the open border type policy. Now, if you go to a country, there's a lot of issues here in Deutschland with people doing this and taking all the benefits and saying, no, we're not assimilating, we're not doing any of your shit. Screw you. You're a problem, and you need to get your
yeah,
ass out, right? A lot of USA was built on bringing us the poor, bringing us
but
whatever, as long as you want to work,
you're tired.
individualism. Yeah, and if those immigrants come here and they fit into the society, they make something of themselves, which a lot of them do. I'm not a person that says kick out every freaking person, you know what I mean? But you
Yeah.
also can't have people just pouring over the border. I mean, that
Yes,
is
I get it.
insanity. Who's paying for this? The cities can't handle that in Texas, right? So that is my debate on it, because everyone in this little the bubble we're in on the Twitter is like, you're the same. Why are you calling illegals or immigrants? Like you're doing the same thing. I'm like, first of all, I'm following the rules. Second of all, I'm paid to be here most of the countries I go to. Third of all, I don't take any benefits. I spend a lot more money than the locals. So that's my opinion on that little discussion. But anyways, keep going.
Okay. Now it's a funny thing. If you want me to get philosophical, I can start being philosophical. Now the issue is that what makes you legal or illegal? I mean, I'm talking. You asked the question why you have the crisis on the border, and also you are having a crisis in Europe as well, with people from Africa and Middle East. Okay, what makes you legal or illegal? Because, for instance, if you kill someone, you shoot somebody. Before you shoot it, you're not a murderer, and when you shoot them, you're a murderer. That's it. That's how you. If you want to be called a thief, before you steal something, you're not a thief, and when you steal something, you're a thief. So it's on the Bible. I'm a Catholic. However, what makes you illegal or illegal? What the difference for me? The line is just for it. It's just like a bureaucrat. That's the difference between an illegal and illegal. The criteria of a bureaucrat, that is lackluster, managing economy, infrastructure, politics, social issues, that kind of thing. And that same bureaucrat is supposed to fix the migration issues and have the best criteria in order to be either legal or illegal. And that's my first thing. When everyone is protesting about an illegal and legal migrant. And let's be honest, people don't have an issue with if it's a legal or an illegal alien. They have an issue that if it's rich or poor. That's actually the name in Spanish is agoraphobia, something like that. Is afraid of the poor people. And basically, that's why racist and xenophobic things happen against migrants, usually poor migrants. But now this is a statistic that not many people comment a lot in the United States. You know that Canadians are one of the
Okay, but
biggest
hold on. Let me come in here though on this point. So Russians can just flood into Ukraine and say, "No, I'm legal. I'm going to take this country." I
No,
mean, how's that
no,
not
no,
war?
that's different.
How
No,
is
no,
it
that's
not
different. That's
war?
a war. That's a war. That's different. That's
But we
different.
got millions coming over the border, right? And like, I guess I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat either, but I'm seeing this shit. I'm like, I can't do this. I can't just go into Switzerland and say, "Give me every benefit you want." I'll get kicked. I would go to Copenhagen right now. I used to live in Denmark. I would get the free education, the free healthcare. If you don't work, you get paid. I wish I could do that, but I can't. For some reason, they won't allow me to do that. And I got to spend all my money and do all these different things and do it the right way. You know.
No, no, I get
So
it. I get it. I get it. I'm not agree.
should
By
we
the
not
way,
have
I'm not saying
borders?
I agree. No, no. We should have borders
Okay.
and a legal due process. Now, the issue is that, by the way, I'm not agreeing with everything that is happening on the border, people entering on droves. I'm not agreeing on that. What I'm saying, please, I'm just putting aside the philosophical things. Because, I mean, the legal or illegal, let's be honest, the issue is if it's a rich and poor. I'm going to go with the Canadians. The Canadians are one of the largest migrant illegal alien groups in the United States. You didn't know that, this, by the way. I'm just asking. No, well, Canadians are like the third something of the most illegal nations sending illegal aliens to the United States. Actually, Canadians are one of them. No one is complaining about Canadians migrating to the US. I presume
You say
maybe
illegal, or they're doing it the right way?
illegal. They are doing it illegal. A bunch of Canadians
Okay.
are illegal in the United States. You
Okay.
didn't
Are
know
they
this?
taking benefits? Are they bringing money with them? Are they assimilating to the
No,
culture?
they're just illegal. I mean, you're asking if they. I mean, for the people
Okay.
that complains about illegal migration,
Okay.
you
Now
have
you're
to
going
kick out the
word
Canadian.
semantics. Okay. Okay.
So this
Okay.
is just the semantics because, of course,
Okay.
a Canadian migrant is not gonna do the same thing as a poor migrant from the south.
See,
Of course, we know,
I
but
see your
we.
point.
Meanwhile, this is the funny thing. Meanwhile, many of the migrants that you see, the poor migrants, that it's legal to enter the United States, plea for asylum or refugee status, and meanwhile you wait your process, you are legal, so you are not an illegal alien, you are a legal migrant right now. It's funny thing how it works. So most of the migrants that people that watch Fox News every day are complaining, those are not illegal migrants, that are actually legal. They use the legal process of the United States, and that's not their fault. I mean, the people up top, and also I know that many people, someone, for instance, you like Nick, you're American, you pay your taxes, and you complain about the benefits, the supposed benefits that most these people receive. And those benefits, I mean, the migrants, they are not asking for those benefits. Some politicians and bureaucrats assign those. The migrants don't make the policy and don't make. So you have to blame your local politician on that regard if you don't like, the support. That's one thing. The other thing is New York, because New York is when I'm seeing the most issues. Um, in New York, you have, the New York City is spending billions on migrants and that kind of thing. Those buildings, this is a funny thing. You're going to love this. All these buildings that are located on cool places in New York, close to Park Avenue, things like that. Big, big old buildings. Those buildings don't have the standard, the living standards in order to be, habitable, and maybe put a hotel or put a complex apartment, something like that. They don't have those requirements. They don't meet those requirements. And in order to be to be used, because I mean the owner of that building wants to make a buck. Meanwhile, the building is not conditioned for New York standards. So, and also they make deals with the local politicians in order to rent those buildings and get a monthly stipend from the taxes of New York City, and they throw the migrants. And that's basically the billions that the New York City taxes are going is to pay to those guys, and then they get a kickback or a support on the next campaign, or then on when the next election of the local congress, something like that. So
The rich
it's
benefit the most from cheap labor. Yeah, and all the migrants, they're all making a shit ton of money. I don't disagree, 100%. I got all your points. I like it, and it makes me think a ton. Hold on. I want to keep doing these quick questions here. Top five food in Latin America countries.
okay. I'm gonna go with that, but can I finish with this because it's very important and you're gonna
See.
surprise. In economics, I was listening to a couple of I'm talking big guys in the US, by the way. but they are not part of the system. You know why the Americans, and actually, especially during the Biden administration, they are bringing so many migrants and that kind of thing, and they are letting the migrants in on the crisis. Can you figure out why?
The population pyramid?
Not exactly. It's actually inflation, because you know that United States had a draconian inflation rate since 2020, since COVID, basically.
See?
And that happened because they printed a lot of money for the CARES Act and
See? COVID shit.
all of these packages, these stimulus packages that after COVID, both from Democrats and Republicans. Trump is on this.
Trump.
So
Trump gave the most money or spent the most money than any other
exactly.
president combined.
Now, the issue is that Biden wanted to print even more money, but he couldn't because on the Senate he had Joe Manchin, that is this particular Democrat that actually kind of acts like a Republican. And thanks to Joe Manchin, on those 2 years that Biden had control, they had a 50-50 Senate, majority on the House, and of course he is the president and has the tiebreaker with Kamala Harris on the Senate. Well, thanks to Joe Manchin, he actually negotiated because he was the tiebreaker on every bill going to Congress, especially these stimulus packages. That when a couple of those still went ahead, but Manchin was the man negotiating directly with both sides, saying, okay, of course, Republicans don't want to approve those packages. They wanted it when Trump was president, by the way. But with Biden, they don't want to approve those packages, and also they're going to create inflation. Of course, every package creates inflation. Well, Manchin, okay, I'm going to allow you a couple of these packages per year, but instead of being like 5 billion, something like that, 5 trillion. I mean, we're talking trillions right now in the U.S. Well, let's give it just a trillion or something like that. And you know, the United States runs deficits every single year. So the United States spends way more than the revenue of the tax revenue. So that difference, they need to print money. So what they do every time they put these stimulus packages on Congress, that money, the U.S. government, the U.S. Treasury has to issue more currency. They have to issue these treasury bills that are buying from the Federal Reserve. That money comes out of thin end, and thanks to those bills, that money comes from thin air, then spends like that gets spent like helicopter money, like we saw in COVID with the steamy checks and that kind of thing, and that's how they created inflation. So that's one thing. I'm
See?
sorry, I'm
What about the
going.
migrants? What does that have to do with the migrants?
No, no, no. We have to go to the migrants, and you're gonna love this, and you're gonna see every American I've seen. Afterwards, after all of these packages, going to McDonald's, going to Walmart, everything is more expensive now. One of the things is the labor, because the labor, I'm talking, the kid just graduated from high school or something like that, wants a better payment in order to work at McDonald's or Walmart or a place like that. And that creates inflation because the biggest one of the biggest expenses are always the human capital, the people working on that. The migration was an attempt by the Biden administration. I mean, this is a bipartisan thing, by the way, um, in order to send, of course, more migrants, low cheap labor of the migrant, in order trying to keep a cap on the inflation rate. That you see the inflation rate still high in the United States, but we're seeing a disinflation. But still things are the prices over there. The CPI is high, and also the numbers are cooked. The real inflation rate, the closest to a real inflation rate, you can see it on a website that is called Shadow Stats by an economist named John Williams, I believe. I believe he used to work. I don't remember, one of the government places that the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. I don't remember where. Shadow Stats, and you can see the real inflation rate, how it used to be calculated before. They schemed, kind
Yeah,
of
they switch it.
yeah, they changed a couple of things, and you can see the real inflation rate, and it's higher. And the migration is actually one of the attempts, there are many, of trying to reduce the CPI, reducing the cost of labor in the United States. But meanwhile, they are printing money right now. before, after COVID was thanks to the CARES Act, that kind of thing. Right now they're printing money for Ukraine and also for
Israel.
Israel and those places, and actually just keeping this thing going on.
Interesting. Um, okay, let's do some rapid fire here, and then we'll wrap it up. But a lot of good stuff here. Top five countries with the best food in Latin America, in your opinion?
Well, Mexico, I love Mexican food. I
Number one.
cook.
Okay.
I'll put it Mexican food. I'll put afterwards. No, well, I have to put Peruvian. I'm not a big fan of
That's
the
good.
Peruvian food,
I
but
do.
it's
I like
good. I
it.
mean, no, I like it, but it's not as great as the narrative. But
Okay.
I like ceviche. By the way, I'm a big fan of ceviche. After three, I can put Venezuela competing in number three.
Where's
I like,
Argentina?
and of course Argentina. Now, what I like about Argentina is not as much the food, because I prefer Venezuelan food than Argentinian food. I live in both places. Uh, the meat, the meat quality in Argentina, I don't think it's as great as is advertised. Now the vegetables, the issue with Argentina is the quality of the raw product and the vegetables. I remember I used to eat tomatoes right away, just straight away the tomatoes. I love the Argentinian tomatoes, a couple of things. And well, okay, let's be honest, for the crowd, let's put Argentina number three, and I can put Venezuela number four. And the fifth one, I mean, it's a tie because you have a bunch of cool places. Chilean food, not a big
You
fan.
don't like
Brazilian,
Brazilian, huh? You don't
no,
like
no,
Brazil?
I don't love it. I
I
mean,
don't.
I'm
I don't
gonna
really care for it.
no, but I mean the pastries. I kind of like the pastries. I'm gonna put Colombia because I'm a big fan of the bandeja paisa.
Colombia too was so bland for me. I didn't like that. I like the seafood in Brazil. You can get a ton of seafood because that's great. But okay, that's a good list. What do you think of passport bros?
Well, they are misunderstood. It's just I like to no, because I like to
Because
put
it's your
everything
clientele or what?
as a handful of them. You might say, I mean, they don't. Hey, I'm a passport bro. They don't tell me because they told me their story and two plus two. I mean, by the way, I love them. I mean, nothing against them. But it's a funny thing. I explain everything with economics, so please, if you bear with me one more time, what the passport bro movement is nothing more than arbitrage. Every time in history, when you have supply and demand, you have demand for something, and the supply doesn't meet that demand, you're gonna go elsewhere, and that's basically what is happening with the passport bros.
Yeah, 100%. The Latin America nomad Twitter bubble. What do you think of that area that we are in?
Oh well, it's a very cool place. It's very fun. I made a bunch of friends on Twitter. Of course, I got a bunch of clients on that regard, and I mean I love it because I can see many things. For instance, I see pictures. I follow. I don't remember his name. I believe he's an American living in Nicaragua and a couple cool places from Nicaragua. The content with bands from my Latin life is very cool. Uh, Also, the people, I see cool things about places that I haven't heard of. I'm talking very niche places. And I'm a big fan of Latin America overall. I love Colombia. I love Brazil. Argentina is beautiful. Mexico is a cool place. Panama also. Well, not as a big fan of Panama right now, but you can tell. I mean, you can see a bunch of cool things. I mean, Latin America is a very special place for a lot of good things and also for some bad things that also go together, mostly with economics. But I mean, it's a beautiful place, and it's very interesting to learn how everything works out here on the continent.
Do you have some accounts that come to your brain that you recommend people check out on the Latin America Twitter sphere?
Well, my Latin life for Vance, I believe, is a mutual
Yeah,
friend.
Vance.
Also, my friend Bowtie Globe also has a cool content.
Bowtie who?
Bowtie Globe, Bowtie
Globe.
Globe,
Globe.
Globe. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen
yeah.
him.
He's a big fan. I'm a big fan of him. A good friend. Also, Bowtie Mara, we have a bunch of Bowtie
Oh
accounts.
yeah, yeah, nice person. The Argentina
Yeah,
person.
Argentina, yeah, it's a superstar. If you are keen on Argentina, it's very cool. And also, he's also on economics like myself. Anyone else? Jake Nomada. Jake Nomada is,
He was like the
is
original guy, wasn't he, about Latin America? He's been down there for a long time. The gringo.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Also, Jake, I'm a big fan of Jake. Also, it's a cool dude. What else? Who else? Also, the niche accounts, Bowtie Brazil. There are a bunch of ones from Mexico that I love. I like Bowtie Passport, another Bowtie. Also, outbound Mexico. My good friend Iberian American is mostly about fun things, about the women and the food. Gringo Guerrilla. I mean, depends on what you're looking for. Specific information, or just having fun, or just aesthetic content about Latin America. Depends. I mean, with every account that I mentioned, I'm sure I'm missing a couple of ones. Hope they forgive me. But with those accounts, you're gonna have fun learning about Latin America.
Yeah, it's a really cool community. I've met a lot of cool characters and learned a lot as well. I like it.
Bogota,
Awesome.
Colombia, also Bogota, Colombia. It's
Yeah, he's a good
also
dude. Nice
it's a
guy.
good
He's
dude.
in
So yeah,
Bogota.
yeah. He's in Bogota right now, but I believe he's from Santa Marta. He's from another place. He's not from Bogota, but he's living over there. But I mean, but originally he's from other place within Colombia.
Beautiful. My amigo, Andres, it was a beautiful conversation. I appreciate it. I learned a lot. I got a broadened perception on Venezuela. One of these days, I hope to get to the magical country. I plan on getting a place in Brazil. I think Brazil has my soul for sure, but I would love to explore that country because I've heard many good things and obviously the negatives, but I hope the country continues to go on a steady path. And with guys like you, sharing the content and trying to help people out. I think you're doing your part. So I commend you for that. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, Nick.
And then obviously, let's pitch your stuff. So you have your website, kind of main services exactly for people. What do you do?
Mostly is due diligence, depending on the requirements. Is something very, it gives me cringe to say it's consulting with a holistic approach.
Holistic.
But yeah, it gives me cringe every time I say it, but it is what it is. So depends on what you're doing, traveling, maybe paperwork, real estate, cultural things, that kind of thing. On my website, venezuelaninsider.com, you can see my services. Also, I have corporate services. If you're thinking of maybe putting a branch of your company here and things like that. And also macroeconomics, I can give you my honest macroeconomic analysis for the country, good, the bad things, and the ugly things as well. And so it depends. What you're gonna have that I always guarantee is you're gonna have my sincere opinion regarding any issue that you might have regarding the country.
Yeah, I can feel that after this conversation. Like I said, I think I asked you a while ago on the Twitter. I'm like, look, do you work for the government or what's your story? But after this conversation, I feel like I could trust you, and I think you're going to give it to the people straight for sure. So, all right, my friend, I'll put your website on here and all that, and we'll go from there. But have a great day. Enjoy your beautiful weekend in Venezuela. Okay.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend, and also go. What is your team's name on Germany?
The Rangers. Go
The
go
Rangers.
Rangers. Yeah.
Frankfurt. I'm sorry, Dusseldorf. I'm sorry, it's Dusseldorf.
Munich,
I'm sorry, Munich. The Munich Rangers.
Bavaria.
Go
Yes.
Rangers and go Raiders.
All right, and everyone else, live bold. Ciao, ciao.